You're holding it wrong, the sergeant said, his voice sharp enough to slice through the hum of the training field. The line drew quiet laughter from a few nearby recruits, the kind that hides insecurity behind mockery. She adjusted her grip slightly, not to appease him, but to feel the balance of the rifle against her palm. Her silence unnerved him more than any argument would have. He saw a rookie, fresh from officer school, too calm for someone still learning the ropes. What he didn't see was the past she carried, medals stacked quietly in drawers. Dawn spent perfecting aim until her breath and trigger became one rhythm. She could have corrected him. She could have told him where his own stance wasted seconds. But she didn't. There's power in letting someone underestimate you, in watching arrogance write its own undoing. Around her, the air held that strange mix of authority and assumption, and she let it settle. Because the lesson he thought he was teaching wasn't the one that would be remembered. Lieutenant Elise Ward arrived at Camp Valor carrying more silence than luggage. At 26, she was the kind of newcomer the old guard didn't know how to read. Calm, deliberate, too composed for someone still finding her place. Her record said enough. Top of her ROTC class, years of competitive shooting, discipline so precise it bordered on instinct. But records don't talk in barracks, and whispers travel faster than respect. Quota fill, one instructor muttered, the phrase sticking to her name like dust. She didn't argue. She simply stayed later than anyone else. When the range lights dimmed and the others left for the mess hall, her silhouette remained, steady, focused, patient. Each shot echoed in rhythm with something older than training. In the stillness between the reports, her father's voice returned. You don't pull a trigger. You release a truth. He'd taught her that in the woods behind their small home, where shooting wasn't about hitting, it was about knowing. That memory lived in every breath she took behind a scope. The others saw a ghost at the range, but ghosts don't seek approval. They wait to be remembered. The field evaluation began beneath a sky split by crosswinds, the kind that tests more than aim. Elise was paired with a spotter who greeted her with a grin too wide to be friendly. Try not to break a nail, princess, he said, loud enough for laughter to ripple through the line. She didn't flinch. Instead, she studied the mirage on the horizon, read the air like a language, and adjusted her scope. When her first round cracked through the distance, the steel plate sang, dead center at 1,200 meters. The spotter gave a lazy shrug. Beginner's luck, he muttered, marking her shot low in the logbook. Again and again, she hit, and again, he called it chance. Around them, the rhythm of rifles rose and fell, but her focus stayed still, anchored in quiet precision. She whispered wind corrections to herself. Half a mil right, quarter hold. Always exact, always unnoticed. The instructors glanced over, but didn't care to question what they'd already decided. By evening, as the range cooled to silence, a shadow lingered near the observation deck. A colonel, watching through binoculars. He said nothing, only turned away after her final shot struck home. But in the measured tilt of his head, something had changed, a quiet recognition, forming like dawn behind cloud. By dawn, the range at Camp Valor had turned into a battlefield of patience and pride. The qualification trial was simple on paper, 5 steel targets, each farther than the last, the final one past 1,600 meters. But the wind was a living thing that morning, curling across the valley, dragging fog in its wake. One by one, the candidates took their positions, their shots breaking into the mist, half of them missing steel altogether. Curses, adjustments, and forced bravado filled the air. Elise waited. When the instructors asked for the next shooter, she stepped forward without a word. Her uniform was damp, her face calm. She set her rifle down, dialed her dope, and studied the wind like she'd done since she was a child standing beside her father in the woods. The first shot struck with a clean metallic ring. The second followed, faster. The third, wind shift, correction, impact. Each strike echoed like punctuation marks in a language only she spoke fluently. By the fourth target, the laughter had stopped. Then came the fifth, 1,625 meters, swallowed by fog. She exhaled, let the mist blur the world into silence, and squeezed. 3 full seconds passed before the faint, distant clang carried back across the valley. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to stop, as if paying respect to the sound of certainty. The wind carried the last echo of her shot downrange as the instructors stood frozen behind their scopes. No one dared speak until a slow crunch of boots broke the silence. From behind the observation tent, a tall figure stepped forward. Colonel Hayes, the commanding officer of Camp Valor himself. The instructors stiffened, whispering under their breath as he reached for the clipboard on the table. His eyes moved down the page, tracing the data, each impact confirmed, each range verified. When he looked up, his gaze went straight to Elise. "Lieutenant Ward," he called. Her stomach tightened. For a moment, she thought she'd overstepped some unspoken rule. She walked toward him, steady but unsure. The colonel stopped her halfway, then raised his hand in a crisp salute. "Ma'am," he said, his tone edged with quiet pride. "Remind me never to correct your trigger hand." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The men who'd mocked her stood motionless, the joke gone from their faces. Hayes lowered his salute, nodding once before walking off without another word. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was reverent. The field that once echoed with laughter now carried something heavier, quieter, and far more permanent: respect. Night fell over Camp Valor with the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm. The range was empty now, just the smell of oil, gunpowder, and cooling steel. Elise sat alone at her bench, a soft lamp casting gold over the disassembled pieces of her rifle. Her hands moved methodically. Wipe, inspect, reassemble, each motion as measured as her breathing. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. Colonel Hayes stopped a few feet behind her. For a moment, he simply watched, then said, "You're being considered for the Special Operations Sniper Integration Program. First woman in a decade." She looked up, the words settling like distant thunder, heavy but quiet. There was no grin, no triumphant spark, just a steady nod. "Understood, sir." He studied her for a second longer before turning away, leaving her with the hum of the night and the rifle she trusted more than anything. When the door shut behind him, Elise ran her hand along the cold barrel, checked the chamber one last time, and whispered the words her father once told her. "You don't pull a trigger. You release a truth." The sound of it disappeared into the dark, but its weight stayed. Some lessons aren't taught in classrooms. They're written in silence, in patience, in the steady rhythm of breath behind a rifle's scope. What happened that day at Camp Valor wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about reminding them what quiet strength really looks like. Dawn breaks over the empty range now, the light catching the steel plates that still bear her marks. 5 perfect rings of proof. Somewhere, another rookie will hear the same words, "You're holding it wrong." And maybe they'll remember this story before they answer back. Because sometimes, the loudest statement isn't a retort or a boast. It's a single calm moment of truth that can't be argued with. If stories like this one remind you of the kind of courage that doesn't need to shout, hit subscribe. It helps us keep telling the ones that still deserve to be heard.